Greetings, sir and sirettes, and welcome back to From the Depths with me, Alathrix, and of course, welcome back to our prefab build. In today's video, I'm hoping I can completely finish this now and do some tests with it. At the moment, it's looking decent in my opinion. It's more of a gunboat than anything else, and honestly, the bridge I'm going to put down is going to be very, very minor. Like I said in the previous video, I want to keep the hull changes to a bare minimum. Adding a bridge, adding stuff over where the hull ends naturally, is all going against that theme, and honestly, I feel like I've gone overboard with that already. So, very small bridge, just somewhere to sit. It's going to be really flat and boring, but still, it's just going to be there just to make the whole ship look a bit more centralized, otherwise it will just be a gun barge. Which, to be fair, I have built plenty of, though at the moment I am trying my darndest to try and add bridges and make our ships look a bit better, things like the Plague Guard and our recent Cramcraft, for instance. Either way, though, we need to decide on just where we're going to be adding all of the weapons at the back and just how many, and I need to decide on what type of propulsion we're going to use, because sadly, in water, there are no prefabs, but of course we do have just the regular propellers here, which are just standard and work, so that's fine. But we do have this gap. So I'm thinking, do we have the ability to add a steam engine? If there's any prefabs, yes there is. Are any of these propellers? Haha, fantastic. So we can add either one of these, or we could go completely silly and go with one of the prefabs of a jet. We could add a jet to this thing, but that would mean keeping this above water at all times, which could be difficult, because this is going to be one heavy craft. Unless I add some propulsion at the bottom to keep this thing stable, along with some PID, which I think it will be absolutely fine, because some of the basic AIs here do come with PID attached, although I will have to at least activate them. Now, I have been told a number of things since the last video by the lovely people who have been working on all these things, and first of all, it turns out that the PID systems currently are a little bit weird in the dev branch, because for some reason, pitch is inverted. So up is down, down is up. It's going to cause some problems, but we're not really going to go too much into PID, again, unless we're trying to keep the back completely out of the water at all times. So that all depends on just how weird we make this thing. On top of that, it turns out that yes, the advanced cannons are clearly meant to be turrets, that's just an error which will be fixed soon enough, but most importantly, and something I'm quite sad about, is that currently the missile systems are not loading in with the correct missile type. For instance, this one here is quite clearly meant to be a cluster missile. We have the smaller missiles here, we have the larger ones, so these should be able to take these with them, and then fire them at the enemy. That's not correct. So that is something to consider. In fact, I believe it's even in the name of the thing. So, yeah, if I do add missiles, I'll have to just do my best guess at what they're trying to be, but I will be avoiding some of the more complex ones, like the cluster missiles, but I will be sticking with things like torpedoes and just the regular missile systems, because that's all nice and easy. In fact, this space here is pretty perfect for a sizable missile system, then two on the side here, and I've decided to go against using this one over here, just because it is a bit too close to everything else, and I think we can use this for just a nice armor block, missiles, or something else which we can use to defend the core. So with all that out of the way too much waffling, I'm gonna get some building done, be right back with some potatoes, or at least a more built ship. So it seems like some of the missiles do have the correct missiles currently inside of them, but some clearly don't. For instance, one of the torpedoes had a missile attached to it, which didn't even have fins, so clearly that's not quite working. But these, on the other hand, do have the correct missiles. If we fire them, they have a delay, and they activate mid-air, and it looks bloody awesome. Then they say hello to the Marauder. Nice and simple, taking up a minimum amount of space, all well and good. Now I'm tempted to add a on-deck torpedo to this section here, but I may not. It all depends on which ones we have available to us. So, where's the torpedoes? If I am a little bit less blind, that'll be lovely. We have the cluster one. I'm going to avoid that because that definitely doesn't have the correct stuff in them currently. Yep, that's not meant to be a missile, clearly. We have this one, which is just a single. Oh, no, it's a double, which would actually fit scarily well. Oh, we could actually have that, yeah. Just extend that metal a bit more and maybe place it, like, here. Yeah, sure. Okay, let's do that. So that way we have all of this section finished. Then we can work on the bridge, and what I really need to do soon is just have this thing moving. I really want it to be able to stay afloat. The problem is the top section really should be done first, since that's how I'm going to separate all the bottom. Okay, that should work. Might have to set up the local weapon controllers, though, just to make sure they don't fire the incorrect way. So only the ones facing the enemy fire, but yep, they're eventually going to reach the enemy, and... there we go. You could just about see the explosion. Lovely. I've also went ahead and added some of the AA guns to the side. These are all going to be set up with a second AI, so these only go after the lighter aircraft. Same with any of the advanced cannons, which seem to be mostly for anti-air. You know, anti-air firing aircraft. I know, a radical idea. I have no idea how to build a bridge. Let's be real here, I haven't made enough of them, and, well, that looks interesting at least. But you get the overall shape, and that's the point. So, let's make sure the Pearl can move at the back there. Yes, it can. Fantastic. Yet another anti-aircraft weapon. This thing is going to really destroy light to medium aircraft at this rate. Not so sure about heavily armoured enemies, though. The mortars will do well because they are armour-piercing and everything else, but other than that, I think this is going to really struggle with anything with proper heavy armour. I mean, I could just spam heavy armour, but that's so expensive. It's such a cheesy way of getting loads of defence. So for now, I'm just going to rely on good old standard metal spam. Which sounds like a really terrible food or a really terrible band, one of the two. I could raise up the Pearl. Okay, so here's the problem. I really shouldn't have had this gun here as high up as it is. This should just be lower, even if the barrels are on level with this, because it's never going to be pointing at the enemy, and it's kind of threw off the entire shape. It's made this way too tall, so I've had to try and keep it stumpy, which I'm not a big fan of, and it's just caused everything to be a little bit off. It also means I've had to build way more superstructure, which, again, not happy with, considering that's meant to be the whole point of this video, to try and ignore that kind of stuff. At least I'm just adding to it rather than replacing. Although later on I will be replacing when I add more torpedoes below deck because we're just going to have so much space. There is no way we're going to use all this space. There's just... we're going to have the ammunition storage, fuel storage, ammunition processors, the AI, the secondary AI, and that's going to take maybe a quarter of the ship total. Maybe half. Because I just have the space, so I may as well use it. So yeah, there's plenty of space for everything else, so torpedoes at the back. I would like to use a laser system. The problem is, once again, going off only prefabs, if I can find the laser systems, there they are. We just have these examples, and they're going to be quite difficult to place. These are clearly not designed to be put on a turret, because, well, how could you shape it like that? But if you really wanted to use these, bear in mind, if you're going off normal rules or you're just playing the game, you can just chop off this section at the end, and then add one of the transceivers, and then connect this to a turret. Very easy. Now, with all that said, we do have this, the laser anti-munition system. It's going to be really difficult to place still, but I think we do have the potential, because of how weird I've built up the bridge, we could very well place these. Gonna struggle a little bit, but yeah. Well, considering we have so much space for engine power, putting down a couple of these around the craft wouldn't be the worst. Although, yeah, I think they're going to be stuck almost primarily around the bridge just because of sheer lack of space. Okay, excellent. Kind of wish there was a laser turret in the prefabs. That would be nice. Like how we have the particle cannon turrets. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. Let's get building. So I've just realised this craft is already 100,000 resources more than our cram battleship. And we're like 2/3 of the way done with the weapons, and we haven't added the engine or anything else yet. Yeah, this is very expensive. I do think this is going to absolutely destroy a lot of enemies, especially from the Deepwater Guard and Onyx Watch. Maybe less so past that. I feel like it's going to struggle versus heavy armor, although with the new torpedoes, I maybe a bit less, and with the mortars. But I just don't think it's going to be good for its cost. That's the main thing. It's going to be really good, just for its cost, you can have way more. Or maybe I'll be proven completely wrong. That does happen on occasion. And by occasion, I mean pretty much always. So I'm tempted to add 2 more heavy mortars here. That way we have 6 anti-armor weapons all ready to go, all spaced out, so they're unlikely to be destroyed at the same time. We have the torpedoes, which are anti-heavy armor. That way on the back, I don't have to focus on anything here, since I do want most of the space for our propulsion. I can just have very light weapons. In fact, you could easily have a little helicopter section here. That'd be really easy, just a little landing bay. Landing pad. Helicopter pad. Words. Okay, I'm just boxing stuff off above us right now, and I really want to see the railguns in action. So, we have this over here, which apparently is RTGs. Lovely, that'll give us all the battery power we need, which means the railguns should now be functioning lovely, since they do require energy in the form of batteries. So, let's see how they do, shall we? So, they do have a red tracer, which makes them a lot easier to figure out which thing we are hitting with them. There they are. And deflected. That didn't help. Very quick shots. Decent bit of damage, though. Yeah, most of those explosions are coming from the railgun shots. Can we hit again? Yep, there we are. That explosion then, for instance, and those two. Okay, not the most deadly, but the damage is racking up fairly quickly. That's good to know. Now, it could power everything via RTGs. It's not really something I'm a big fan of, personally, just how expensive they are to place down, but we could have RTGs and we could have a fuel engine. They're saying that both of these blocks are 18,000. Not too sure. Either way, though, we do need the batteries in order to power the railguns, since I believe they don't drain directly from the engine. Guess we'll find out as we continue. Okay, so for now, what we're going to do is I'm using a single RTG prefab in the front here, and that took up way less space than I expected, so it's super heavily armoured, it won't be destroyed very easily, and I'm still going to use a fuel engine as well. The reason is the RTGs feed directly into the batteries then use the electric engine to turn that electric into engine power. The problem is, as the railgun drains the energy from the batteries, it's also going to lower the maximum output from the electric engine, as you might imagine. And that's going to cause problems with the anti-munition system. Even if it's only a spike of drain every now and again, that could still be a serious issue. So, fuel engine somewhere near the back, most likely. But at least now we do have the railgun online. Oh, that might explain why I didn't see many explosions from the railguns. I kept seeing so much damage being done, but I couldn't tell where the damage was coming from. It's using an armor-piercing head and the penetration depth fuse. So it's going inside the target and then detonating, causing internal damage. Okay, that makes more sense. Also, I've just been armoring up the front. We now have a small fuel storage. We have an ammunition storage. What I need to do is start adding some ammunition processors, though we could just have loads of ammo instead. No, ammunition processors. This is a large enough vehicle. I think that's probably worth it. No idea what to do with the back here, so let's focus on making this thing able to move. How about that? Let's add an AI room or two and give it the ability to move. And perhaps float. That might be good. Okay, so let's see what types of AI we have. We have the ultimate version here, which comes with a lot of PIDs, more than I'm going to use. We have the advanced, with no PIDs and some weird things there. What's going on with that? Is that just like an update error? There we go, yep, there we go. So now these are now slotted in properly. And then we have the basic. Okay, so although one has way too many AIs, we're going to have to use this one for everything we need on the main set of things. And by AIs, I mean AI PIDs. And then we'll just go with the basic one, which will be just number 2. Which will control the side weapons. Yep, it does have a target prioritization. Everything else is a bit of a waste, but I'm trying to go off prefabs as much as possible, and if we ever need it for something else, it means we have some backup. Since you can always have different maneuvers and such set up to activate at different times, if you're using control blocks or PID or the breadboard, there's loads of ways to work with that. But for now, let's just work with this one. So, first one, I want... Don't really need pitch. Kind of want roll. I found even on very stable ships having a roll PID is okay. And then there's a couple of propellers or something, just to make sure the thing doesn't rock too much when it fires or gets hit, especially when it gets hit. Then we want it to be able to stay at a certain altitude in the water as well. Because at the moment, I doubt that water pumps are going to be enough to keep this thing afloat. Maybe they will, but there's just so much metal on this thing. So I'll quickly work on that. You will be number 2. Well, actually, I'm going to move you, so no point in doing that just now. I'm going to put you somewhere a bit safer. You'll be number 2, and you'll target lighter aircraft or lighter craft, and you'll be number 1 who will target pretty much everything by default. Okay, so all I've done is I've added one of the default AIs. I've went to the plug and play section and I've added, where are you, the circling ship AI, and in one of the PIDs, I've simply turned it onto hover, setting the false point to 1. Right now, obviously, very imbalanced, we have no pitch control or anything else, but this should be able to keep us above the waterline. And I'm going to build these into the hull itself, because that just looks terrible. There we are, so they're all armoured up on the inside. Now we can seal these off, work on sealing up the AI, and then we can add some to the pitch as well. But remember, apparently the pitch is currently inverted, so I need to bear that in mind if I do use the pitch AI. Which I think I will, rather than control blocks. Turns out, I did not need the pitch controls, because that's all covered by the basic water AI, at very least. It's covered by AI, plug and play, and this one here, the circling ship AI. However, this altitude is obviously a little bit off, because we're kind of in the water. Yes, I'm going to change that. Currently it's at 0, so probably to about 3 or 4. Still, nice and balanced. Just need some roll controls, and this thing's going to be very, very stable. Just making the water completely opaque for a second. Looks weird and you can't see underneath it at all. I'd say maybe a little bit higher up, just because of the side guns, and pitch still needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned, but other than that, yep, that seems fine by me. Okay, gonna go back to that though when we're finished, because I do need to take into account centre of mass and everything else, and considering we're not done yet, that means the centre of mass is gonna shift. Added some waves, so now it's a bit easier to see where everything is. Made it a little bit more transparent just a second ago, and I think that's fine. So, what do I need to do next? Armour up everything we just added, made sure all those components are finished, so I don't need to go back to them later. Then we need to add a regular type of propulsion. I think I am going to go with the steam option, because I have almost no experience with these, so I am very curious. That looks really weird. But yeah, we have all these options here, so we can add some very, very powerful movement. For turning, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this will act as our forward propulsion. After I armor everything up. This might be a bit of overkill, but I don't particularly care. It looks awesome. Might need to put it upside down though, if it can be placed upside down, just because that's sticking out a bit too much. Though it would be cool to build that into the deck section. Still a bit worried there. Ah, that's an issue. Even though it's here, it's still a little bit out of the water, as you can see, so the efficiency is diving drastically. Not particularly quick. Don't really want it to be that quick, honestly, so that's mostly fine, but yeah. That is very cool to watch. Roll clearly needs to be altered on this thing, but still fairly stable, which is good. I'll mess around with that a little bit until I've decided how we're going to set this up, and then next, armor up all this on the top, give it a bit of a lip to make it look a bit more watertight, then decide on if we're going to add any weapons or anything to the back. Or we could use it as a carrier, just put a big H there, then put down a helicopter. Turns out the Pearl is using flak shells as well. That's pretty nice, honestly. Yeah, this ship is going to be deadly. It's going to be really good. Again, I think the only thing it's not going to be particularly good with is just its cost. It's going to be very expensive for what it does. But considering I'm not going to be bringing it into the campaign, that's fine. May have made the weather a bit too extreme. You know, a bit of lightning, huge waves. Not the nicest. Oh, look at that swell. Well, the ship isn't sinking, so that's a good sign. I'm being bounced all over the place, but let's ignore that. Yeah, having our propulsion there is a bit of a problem, really. It's out of the water, like, most of the time. Oh my god, the poor ship. I mean, it looks cool. So the next problem we need to address is the fact the center of mass is way too high, especially since we're using propellers to push us up. It just makes everything tip way too much whenever it tries to turn or anything, since our turning is underneath the deck at the very, very bottom at the moment. Yeah, that is underneath the deck level. Doesn't really affect us combat-wise, just I don't like how it looks all that much, really. And yes, I am using jets for roll, because I love jets everywhere, because I like fire. Fire makes Lathrix happy. I was just talking for a good half an hour then, and my microphone had turned itself off for no apparent reason. So, to sum up that 30 minutes in a very short way, we have two turrets which I really want to use. This one over here is using high explosive and EMP. It is 280mm in terms of its gauge. Then we have this turret over here which is using HESH rounds. HESH rounds do a lot of internal damage and I really, really like them. So I'm thinking of adding either two of these or just a single one here. So either one on both sides or one just in the center, and then we're pretty much done for weapons outside of some extra torpedoes if we want to add them by breaking into the hull. But that can all be done a little bit later. I have now balanced the overall weight of the craft, so the center of mass is a little bit higher, and I've also changed the propulsion and some of the settings, so now it's a lot more balanced, including in terms of roll. I have had to add some... Where are you? Some fail-safes to the mortars, because normally mortars are pretty safe to fire since they can only fire at very extreme arcs, and they're normally at the top, but since we've placed them like this, well, you may see some scarring around here, because I had one test and the mortar literally ripped apart the bridge. So, everything's a lot safer now. I'm going to put down either one or two of these, then we're pretty much done for weapons outside of torpedoes. I'll be back in a second when more progress has been done. We are getting very close to being finished, and I really like how this craft has turned out. Again, love the prefabs. People who designed it, truly, truly fantastic builders. I just kind of put it all together. I'm basically a person putting together IKEA furniture of death. So the issue is, we just don't have enough space. Between this weapon being just so oversized and everything for the steam here, using the weapons I wanted to use was just going to become a serious problem. So the options really are either more missiles, or some of the smaller cram cannons, or some of the smaller advanced cannons. I do love missiles, so I am very tempted by that. We could even put a couple of the larger missiles there. We do have space for that. Just nothing explosive. Right now, after doing a bit of testing and checking out, if one of the advanced cannons would have gone up, all of them would have, even if I would have placed it here. With the smaller ones, that would be less of an issue, especially since some of these are kinetic, which are a bit less explodey. But still... Maybe missiles. It would be a nice way to round off everything. Though, cram cannons are nice too. We also have mortars, of course. There's plenty of space. We could have a serious mortar board there. If we go with that. There we are. We have these, which I haven't really used before. Which, I've got to be honest, I did look at these a little bit earlier. These look scarily like the crams I used in my little base building video recently. Very similar setup with these, just not quite as big. Okay, I'll go with mortars for now. Just going to do one proper test versus the crossbones to see how this thing does, and any problems so we can start fixing them. Then we can start doing the final edits. Well, there go the mortars I just added. Oh, I should stop healing that, please. Thank you. Seems like we are still rolling quite a bit. I will be solving the whole weight issue as we start building the fuel engines and such. Cram! Seems like we're too far away for our smaller mortars. Oh no, our smaller mortars have just fired. They're really hard to see, and they are being fired in little sets. There's the larger mortars. Loads of flak. Oh, need to change the aim point to try and stop firing things underwater. That might be nice. I mean, this really should win. It does cost almost 3 times as much as the crossbones. Okay, twice as much. I forgot how expensive the crossbones is for a second there. I was thinking more along the lines of my cram ship, which is, yeah, about 3 times cheaper. I took 4% damage. On the upside, of all these prefab weapons being a bit small for this size of craft, it means I have been able to just spam armor and do every type of armor I'd like. We have spacing, we have layered, we have shiny, we have dull. We have potato armor, we have turnip. Basically, any type of armor we wanted is currently on there. I love mortars so much. Tempted to just add more of the larger mortars at the back. Yeah, so there's the problem. These smaller mortars, the range is so limited. They are at the very, very limit now, and the AI seems to like this range. The preset AI, so what have we learned? It still rolls too much, and the smaller mortars are not a good option for this craft. Okay, replacing the small mortars with the large ones, adding torpedoes, fuel engine. Also, by the looks of things, we're not generating enough electricity. That's interesting. Oh, of course, once we add the fuel engine, that will be fixed. Did I mention I'm going to fix the center of mass? Because I'm going to fix the center of mass. So something to note is we do have a lot of engine power. It's just all tied up in our steam engine at the back. And as soon as that goes down, for instance right now it's just hit, we lose all of it. Except for our electric power, which as you can see is going down and down and down because the railgun is just taking way too much draw. Also, at this point, this craft is becoming very deadly. It's actually becoming very, very powerful. So, we definitely still need the fuel engine, which will help to power everything. The steam engine should really be there just for movement. And honestly, even then, perhaps just going with normal propellers might be better, but I like it. It's something different for the back section. Now, fuel engines. Finally taking a look at the fuel engines, and a couple of them have really interested me. First of all, this one here, 6,800 maximum power. It's this one here, the Harmony. Costs 6,800, and the reason why it interests me is because it has no exhausts. It's purely using the radiators. I didn't know that the radiators could be a complete replacement for the exhaust, but I obviously don't know all that much about the engines. When it comes to engines, it's probably the thing I know the least about. Engines and maybe particle cannons. They're the two things I know the least about. So all of these are obviously created by people who know far, far more than me in this regard. So it's going to be difficult to judge them. I'm just going off what they look like and what their purpose is. These are all using fuel injectors, so it's going to be really fuel hungry. Whereas things like, where are you? This one here is using loads of turbochargers, so it's going to be a bit more efficient at high RPM. I understand that, but that's about it. And that gives you 6,600, but is a fair bit bigger. I think I'm going to go with the ones which don't need the exhausts, because, yeah, I'm just fascinated by that. And we'll see if they actually do need exhausts. Perhaps they do need exhausts, there's the thing, and it's just, here is the initial block, you need to add exhausts to it later. As always, the phone goes off just as I'm finishing a section of the video, so let's put a couple of these down. I believe I have space just past here, if I can find it. There we are, yep, this little crevice here is completely devoid of anything, so I'll put a couple of the engines as low down as possible to try and get the center of mass to go down as well. This craft is pretty big now as well. It's already over 30,000 in terms of its volume, so it's also over 10,000 in terms of the size of my cram carrier, which I thought was pretty big, so clearly, no. This will not be a starter vehicle by any means. How am I going to place this down, though? I guess I could put it like this. I'll give it a couple of layers of armor. There's already several layers that way, but let's add another, so let's go like this. There we are, that is plenty. Absolutely plenty of engine power, in fact, more than we need. But now, if we wanted to add things like shields, or more anti-munition systems, or electric potatoes, we could. So yeah, definitely some of these are working correctly. So these are some of the torpedoes, and they are one turn, thumperhead, ballast tanks, explosive warheads. That's interesting. So once it's turned towards the target and it's heading towards it, it's not going to be tracking anymore. But in return, it does have a thumperhead, which is pretty good. Yeah, it increases the impact, and also increases the health, I believe, quite dramatically. Am I correct with this? Yep, it definitely does. Okay, well, I've never actually seen these in action, so sure. I'm going to add one more set of them back here. Actually, no, I have no space there. One more set of them perhaps here. I think I'll have space. Or I could use one of the other types of torpedoes, and then I'm going to say I'm done at this point. Not going to use the cluster ones because they're a bit too complex, so I think I'll use this one here, the porcupine launcher. Okay. At this point, I am going to say I am finished. There's still a fair bit to do in terms of armoring up, fixing the paint, fixing the bridge here, but ultimately it is finished. It can move, it can defend itself, it has decent armor, it has good weaponry, it even has a very light munition defense system. This is a very functional ship. Very expensive though, at 500,000 resources and about 33,000 volume. This thing is very big and very expensive. The cost of over 3 of my cram cruisers, or 2 of my abomination missile aircraft, or even 1.5 of my carriers with all of their aircraft. It's very expensive, but I do also think it's going to do incredibly well. I think the prefabs are better than I gave them credit for, honestly. Are they a good substitute for your own designs? Not really. I would still say go with your own designs because you can specialise them in ways which will suit the situation better. For instance, really with some of these weapons, what I would have loved is if they were either a bit larger or I could have messed around with them more so all their components aren't in the superstructure here and they were way down into the hull, but since I couldn't mess around with them, yeah, they are a bit more vulnerable than they otherwise would be, and my centre of mass is still too high because of this. I have added some lead to the bottom of the craft, not much because the volume is already insane, but it has helped a bit, and I have got the PIDs now all trying to balance this thing. I'm happy enough how it's turned out. And now, I really want to design my own ship, so I'll be making a new ship fairly soon, which will be one of my first ships in the campaign. I already have the cruiser, which is only 160,000 resources, which isn't too bad in the campaign these days. But I want something with advanced cannons now, because they're just fun to watch. And so let's do a test versus one of my all-time favourite ships, of course, the Bulwark. Now, the Bulwark has some seriously heavy armour, so the reason why I'm going against this is because my main concern with the ship is it might not be able to take out extremely heavy armour. I think it will do absolutely fine versus all the Deepwater Guard, and even the lighter of the Onyx Watch ships, and maybe even some of the other factions which don't just stack armour so much. But I want to see them at their worst. So one great thing with the Railgun is we get the first few hits straight away, which is always really good in these fights, especially in the 1v1s. The Rail's not doing all that much to the turret caps there, but at least they were hitting the turret caps. The mortars are now inbound. Already done 4% damage to the Bulwark. That's really nice. That was a great hit there, really damaging one of the smaller turrets. And as hopefully, the Railgun keeps on doing that. Here come the torpedoes, the larger variants. Doing a fair chunk of damage and causing some holes in the side, which is great. Stop it from being so buoyant. Yep, quite a few bits of metal falling off each time. In fact, the damage is stacked up really quickly. This is before all of these mortars are landing. Though maybe the first wave landed and I didn't notice. That was very potentially possible. Wait, you definitely have a fuse. I know you have a fuse. I've seen the fuse box in those prefabs. Well, that's insane. It's just devastating the Bulwark, yeah. Loads of very fast hits to begin with, then loads of heavy hitting hits. Heavy hitting hits? Heavy hitting shots a little bit later. Once again, I think this is a really good craft. The prefabs are just very, very good. Also, having so much space for stacked armor certainly helped. There we are, the mortar sitting again. Completely annihilating one more of the weapons. Oh, the Railgun is out of power yet again, though. I think you can change the fuel engines to give more power to the batteries. And clearly, I need to do that. And huzzah for missiles. Bulwark now only 66% health, being hit by lots of flak, which isn't really doing anything, but you know, explosives are explosives. And explosions are fun. One thing this has definitely inspired me to do is to build a more mixed armament ship. Normally I focus on one type of weapon. You'll see me having lots of cram cannon craft, missile craft, etc. But I really like this. It's really fun to watch. Again, that initial first strike was really nice to see, and then the heavy hitters a little bit later. Oh, did those torpedoes get stopped by the munition defense, or did I just not see them hit the target? They seem to just kind of vanish. Okay, I'm going to claim victory here now, because this is taking quite a while. Only one weapon is still firing, and well, it looks like this. Just need one good hit with those mortars, really. Like that, but on the front. So, I think one more test, then I'll claim this to be a very successful test. Here we are, the final test, already being fired at by the new ship. Yep, that is pretty horrendous. The cruiser, the Cram cruiser versus the new prefab battleship. Ultimately, the prefab should win this. It costs just under 3 times the cost of the cruiser, and it is way over double the size. So essentially, it really should be 3 versus 1, but I would like to see 1v1 just to see how well the cruiser does. The cruiser's armor is a lot lighter than the Bulwark and the battleship itself, which means these are going to be a lot more deadly. Things which are good against medium armor will really hurt this, so the mortars are going to just devastate it, the Railgun is going to be really good. It's definitely a better fight for the battleship. The only chance the cruiser has is to get a really good initial attack. It did not get a really good initial attack. Good bit of damage, but no. It took out one of the torpedo bays, which is good, but it really needs to take out that railgun. Oh, the munition defense doing pretty well as well, and it was firing at the bridge and missed. Cruiser, really, could have fired at any block, and that's what you chose. Well done. Okay, did it take out? No, neither of the turrets, despite the fact they're not completely in the hull, they still managed to survive that. And the cruiser is apparently trying to chase it down, which definitely isn't in its favour, so its back weapons aren't even firing right now. Something to note for me for the future, need to change the AI on the cruiser, because that is way too close to be trying to chase it down. Okay, the AI gun is removed. The least threatening of all the guns. One of those crams is definitely damaged, the colour has changed, so some of the pellets have been removed, the explosive pellets. For some reason my binoculars aren't working. There we go. Only one of the main guns is still functioning, despite the fact we are broadsiding. It's too late now. Not bad, though. Quite equal on health, but not equal on how many weapons are still online. Having so many weapons on the battleship so spread out, it is way more resistant to damage like this. The only upside the cruiser really has is just the fact that, once again, these weapons are not fully in the hull, so they're not as well protected as they could be, and that's purely because of their size. And I really should have put this one lower, that's definitely a mistake on my part. Oh, the battleship isn't looking great though, to be honest. Well done, cruiser, you survived the damage quite well considering, but... Oh, your form has been sawed in half. Is this online? Oh, yeah, only the smallest gun is fully online. I'm not sure if that one is even trying to fire now. Well, now it definitely isn't. Yep, the cruiser's out. It did better than I expected, though, so, you know, I'm happy with that. Well done, cruiser. So then, let's wrap up and let's talk about the prefab battleship, things I would have done differently if I had started it again now, and things I'm really impressed with in terms of the prefabs. Also, I like the fact the fire is like the last thing to go on this thing. The 2 flame horns are just there. Forever. Because it's a good guy ship. I'll wrap it up as soon as I see this on land. That was such a good shot. Okay then. If I had started again, I think what I would have done is just tried to have all the weapons lower down into the hull itself, even if it didn't look natural, at least what I thought looked natural. It ended up looking worse, having them so staggered in terms of altitude, and it made them a far less defensive. If these two weapons are further down, they would have been way easier to armor up and probably would have been lost a lot later. Though saying that, the cram ship was using 2,000mm cram shells, and they were very high in damage. So they would have got through eventually, but maybe it would have lasted a little bit longer. Other than that, I don't really know what else I would have changed. The prefabs did really well, in my opinion. The ship is still very clearly alive. It definitely won that fight, although with a lot of scarring. But as you can see, the hull is still very much intact in most places. If those weapons were a bit lower down, I probably could have defended them a little bit better. I also definitely had some of the advanced cannons a bit too close to each other, because I'm not that used to advanced cannons yet, because, you know, they just came back to the game, and that definitely caused some chain reactions. At least I think it may have. That one went down suspiciously close to when the Railgun went down, and that could have been the case. There was still like 7 or 8 layers of armor, so I mean, it's not like it was lightly armored, but it could have had more. Do any of the prefabs really stand out to me? I love the mortars, although I think I prefer just standard high explosive mortars or mortars with more kinetic, so more dedication to going through armor. These are fantastic. They're really good. They're super easy to place down, which I really appreciate if I'm going to be using a prefab or recommending a prefab, and they're super fun to watch. The Railgun was way better than I expected. Wasn't so keen on the other advanced cannon at the front. I'd say it's the only one I was a little bit disappointed with in terms of its overall damage, but saying that, it was very clearly an anti-aircraft weapon. The weapon at the back, though, also being an anti-aircraft, the Pearl, that clearly was doing great since it had all those explosives, and in fact, what I'm going to do is one final test versus some small aircraft, just to see them all in action, just to have a final opinion on them. The missile systems are obviously all really good, because they're missile systems, they're hard to get wrong, really, and I was pleasantly surprised with the anti-munition system. The engines all looked amazing. So yeah, the prefabs have come a long way, and you can definitely build a ship just using them if you're just getting used to the game. Another criticism of myself is that I definitely went overboard with the armouring in some places. There's chunks of armour which just aren't really needed and everything, and that has made the cost and the volume higher than it really should be, and I think that's because of the hull size. I don't like having just empty spaces inside of a ship, which I really should have just left in this case. It would have been fine. So the volume and cost could have been lower. But that's just me being a bit weird, seeing an empty space and just being like, no, that can't be right. I don't know what the Buccaneer is. Let's spawn that. It's an aircraft, so let's go with that. Spawned in very far away. So far, the Railgun's having difficulty reaching it properly. So those little blue shells are the advanced cannon I was talking about, which I wasn't a huge fan of. Their damage seems to be a little bit on the lower side, but they are very quick. And they do a decent amount. Not seeing the flak, though. Yeah, could have spawned the flak in a different place as well. That's another problem. It can't turn properly because the turret cap is so huge. I really underestimated that. Did those mortars manage to hit? Well. The Railgun doing really well there. Oh, I don't know what that does hit inside, but it stopped it from being able to fly. Really love those Railguns. They're definitely the weapon I underestimated the most. Okay, let's spawn in the ship a bit in a better position, just to test out the flak. Okay, the flak is already being fired. Let's get over there so we can see what's going on. That looks like the flak shells. Yep, that's definitely the flak. Not as much explosive radius I'd like, but very fast shells and definitely getting the job done. Oh, one of the Railguns took one out. There we go. The flak took out one of the others. Yep, flak took out yet another. So, obviously, the Pearl gets the job done versus very light enemies. Even as annoying as the Flying Squirrel. Though I would like to see a bit more explosive radius on them, or flak radius. Still, lovely. Essentially what I've made is a jack-of-all-trades craft. It's gonna be outdone by things which will focus on, let's say, anti-heavy armor, or anti-aircraft, for instance, but it's gonna be okay in all situations, which I think the prefabs kind of embody pretty well. So with that though, I'm afraid I really am all out of time for today's video. If you have enjoyed, then of course, likes, favourites, shares, comments, all that good stuff helps out me, helps out the channel, and most importantly, shows that From the Depths is a series you wish to see continued in the future. When I come back to From the Depths, it will hopefully be in the campaign, but if I start playing again before then, depending on when the update comes out, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be building next. Although, I am very tempted by a mixed armament craft like this. This has been a load of fun to build, but the whole time, all I was thinking was, I wish I could design my own weapons for this. So maybe that's what I'm going to do. And get some practice building bridges. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.